The afternoon light filtered through Margaret's old quilts, casting geometric shadows across Harold Chen's desk. Not really a desk, just a folding table he'd set up 4 years ago when he couldn't bear to change anything else in her sewing room. The fabric still smelled faintly of her lavender sachets, though he knew that was probably his imagination by now. 67 years old, and he was conjuring ghosts from dryer sheets. The envelope sat in front of him like an accusation. University letterhead, the kind of heavy cream stock that announced itself as important before you even broke the seal. Harold's hands trembled as he slid his thumb under the flap. Arthritis, the doctor claimed, though Harold suspected it was something closer to dread. The paper inside crackled with expensive weight. Past due, $47,000, the number swam. Harold blinked, read them again, then reached for his checkbook with the muscle memory of a man who'd balanced a teacher's salary for 40 years. He flipped to the register page, squinting at his own cramped handwriting. Current balance, $3,847.23. His pension, deposited like clockwork on the first of each month, covered his mortgage, paid off, thank God, utilities, groceries, the occasional hardware store run when something needed fixing. Which was often, lately. The house was 70 years old, same as the neighborhood, and settling into its bones the way old things did. But $47,000? That was a different universe. That was the cost of Margaret's entire hospital stay, the one her insurance had actually covered. That was 3 years of his salary back when he'd started teaching shop at Roosevelt High in 1982. Harold picked up his phone, the smartphone Vanessa had insisted on buying him 2 Christmases ago, loaded with apps he never used, and pulled up her contact. His daughter's face smiled at him from the screen, professionally lit, her auburn hair styled in that sleek way that probably cost more than his monthly grocery bill. He pressed call. It rang 4 times. Long enough that Harold started composing a voicemail in his head. Dad. Vanessa's voice arrived clipped, distracted. He could hear the ambient noise of her office behind her, that particular hum of corporate achievement. This isn't a great time, I'm about to head into a meeting. There's been a mistake with Tyler's tuition, Harold said. The words came out steadier than he felt. I got a past due notice. 47,000, the pause stretched. Harold heard her breathing change, that slight intake that meant she was calculating something. Dad, Derek handles all our finances. I'm sure Tyler's situation is complicated. Her tone had gone cool, professional. The voice she probably used with opposing counsel. We'll discuss it at Sunday dinner. Vanessa, this says past due. That means Sunday, Dad. I really have to go. The line went dead. Harold stared at the phone, at his daughter's frozen smile, then set it down carefully on top of the tuition bill. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Patterson working in her garden next door, her broad-brimmed hat bobbing among the tomato plants. The neighborhood looked the same as it had when he and Margaret bought the house in 1987, modest ranches with detached garages, yards that needed mowing, chain-link fences softened by decades of climbing roses. The kind of place where people still waved from their porches, the kind of place Vanessa used to call home before she married up. Sunday arrived with the weight of obligation. Harold pulled his cleanest flannel shirt from the closet, red and black check, iron creases from where he'd pressed it himself, and the Timex Margaret had given him for their 30th anniversary. $40 from JCPenney, and it still kept perfect time, unlike the smart watches everyone wore now that needed charging every night and tracked your heartbeat like you couldn't tell if you were alive without an app's permission. The drive to Derek and Vanessa's place took 30 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that got progressively newer, larger, more aggressively landscaped. Harold's 1987 Chevy pickup coughed at stoplights, its engine making promises it might not keep much longer. He'd rebuilt the transmission himself 2 years ago, lying on his back in the garage with Margaret's voice in his head reminding him he wasn't 25 anymore. The truck had been old when he bought it used. Now it qualified as vintage, though not in the charming way Derek probably meant when he collected vintage wine. The Ashford house rose from its lot like an architect's fever dream, all glass and steel and angles that screamed, "Look at me." Harold pulled into the circular driveway, his truck settling between Derek's gunmetal Tesla and Vanessa's white Range Rover like a mongrel at a dog show. The contrast wasn't subtle. Harold suspected that was intentional. Derek materialized at the front door before Harold could knock. All teeth and too firm handshake. Harold. Still driving the Flintstones mobile, I see. He laughed like it was a joke they shared instead of an insult they both recognized. Vanessa, your dad's here. Derek Ashford was 43 and looked like someone who paid professionals to maintain it. His hair was the kind of salt and pepper that came from a colorist, not genetics. His casual Sunday wear, pressed chinos, a polo shirt with a discreet logo Harold didn't recognize, probably cost more than Harold's monthly pension. He wore a smartwatch that glowed with notifications, a wedding band that was platinum not gold, and an expression of performative welcome that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. Come in, come in. We just sat down. Derek's hand on Harold's shoulder felt proprietary, steering him through the cavernous entryway. The house smelled like money and whatever the caterers were preparing. Everything echoed, footsteps, voices, the clink of glassware, bouncing off hard surfaces that prioritized aesthetics over warmth. Vanessa appeared from the kitchen, phone in hand, looking up with the distracted smile of someone mentally still in her inbox. Hi, Dad. She kissed his cheek, her perfume expensive and unfamiliar. Her hair was pulled back in a style that showed off diamond studs Harold had never seen before. When did his daughter start wearing diamonds for Sunday dinner? You look nice, honey, Harold said, because it was true even if he didn't recognize her. Thanks. Derek surprised me yesterday. Early anniversary gift. She touched one earring unconsciously, a gesture that seemed more nervous than pleased. The dining room table could have seated 12 comfortably. 3 places were set at one end, the plates pristine white against charcoal placemats, wine glasses catching the light from the modern chandelier overhead. A man in a white chef's coat emerged from the kitchen with the first course, something arranged too artfully to identify immediately. Harold, you're going to love this, Derek said, settling into his chair at the head of the table. Chef Marcus just won some regional award. $300 an hour but worth every penny. The scallops are locally sourced. Sustainable. He pronounced it with the satisfaction of someone congratulating himself on his own virtue. Harold picked up his fork, heavy, balanced, real silver, and took a bite. The scallop was perfectly cooked, delicate, rich. It tasted like Derek's need for validation. Delicious, Harold said, because it was, and because Margaret had taught him that good manners cost nothing. They made it through the first course and halfway through the second, some kind of pork tenderloin with a reduction Derek explained in detail Harold didn't request, before Harold set down his wine glass. He'd taken one sip. Derek was on his third pour, discussing the Bordeaux's terroir with the passion of a convert. I wanted to ask about Tyler's tuition, Harold said into a gap in Derek's monologue. The past due notice I mentioned to Vanessa, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Derek set down his wine glass with careful precision, his expression shifting into something Harold recognized from school board meetings, the face of someone about to explain reality to someone they considered hopelessly naive. Harold, I need you to understand something. Derek leaned back, fingers steepled. Executive posture. Tyler's fund was redirected. The kid wasn't taking his business prerequisites seriously. He wanted to study environmental engineering. The way Derek said it made it sound like a communicable disease. We made an executive decision. That money went into a better investment, our boat. The liquid asset. 42-footer. Docked at the marina. You should come see her sometime. Harold's grip tightened on his fork. The boat. Tyler's education for a boat named like a bad joke. Tyler can work his way through school like everyone else, Derek continued. Build character. Learn the value of money the way you and I did, right Harold? Hard work, real consequences. Harold looked at his daughter. Vanessa was studying her plate with intense focus, cutting her pork into smaller and smaller pieces. Dad, we talked to Tyler. He understands. Derek's right, he needs to learn the value of money. She still wasn't looking at him. Harold felt something in his chest that wasn't quite pain, wasn't quite anger. Tyler. Margaret's favorite. The kid who spent summers in Harold's workshop learning to measure twice and cut once, who built birdhouses and talked about solar panels and sustainable forestry with the earnest passion of someone who believed the world could be fixed. That Tyler was working at Target to pay for community college because his trust fund bought his stepfather a boat. Derek, that fund was from Margaret's life insurance, Harold said carefully, keeping his voice level. 32 years teaching high school had given him practice staying calm when he wanted to overturn desks. She specifically wanted, Harold, with all due respect, Margaret's been gone 4 years. Derek's interruption was smooth, practiced. Vanessa and I are Tyler's parents now. We make these calls. He paused, let that sink in. Besides, that house you're sitting on? In your neighborhood? I ran the comps last month. 680,000, easy. You're living in a gold mine while Tyler works retail. Doesn't that seem backwards? There it was. The real agenda arriving right on schedule. Dad, Derek's right. Vanessa finally looked up, and Harold saw something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or the memory of guilt from back when she used to feel things like that. You're maintaining a 3-bedroom house alone. The yard's getting away from you. Mrs. Patterson next door mentioned you haven't repainted in years. There are wonderful senior communities, I'm not selling Margaret's house. The words came out harder than Harold intended. Derek chuckled, the sound condescending and warm in equal measure. Harold, buddy, it's not Margaret's house anymore. It's your asset. And honestly? You're being selfish keeping Tyler's inheritance locked up in aluminum siding and a foundation that's probably cracking as we speak. Selfish. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Harold looked at his daughter, his little girl who used to help him build stage sets for school plays, who'd spent a summer painting sets for our town and came home covered in more paint than the flats, and tried to find her somewhere in this woman cutting pork into microscopic pieces. I should go, Harold said, setting his napkin on the table. Thank you for dinner, Dad, we haven't even had dessert. Vanessa's voice carried a note of pleading that would have worked better if she'd managed to look at him. I'm not hungry anymore. Harold stood, his back protesting. 70 years of gravity took their toll. I'll see myself out. Derek didn't stand. Think about what I said, Harold. About making smart choices. For Tyler's sake, Harold walked through the echoing house, past the modern art he didn't understand and the furniture that prioritized design over comfort. His truck started on the second try, coughing to life like a defiant old man. In the rearview mirror, he could see them through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Derek's arm around Vanessa's shoulder, both of them watching him leave. Derek said something and Vanessa laughed, his daughter. His little girl. Harold drove home through neighborhoods that grew older and more familiar, where the houses had swing sets in the yards and cars in the driveways instead of garages with enough square footage to qualify as apartments. Mrs. Patterson waved from her porch. He waved back. Inside, the house was quiet in the way only empty houses are. Harold walked through the living room, Margaret's furniture, worn and comfortable, through the kitchen where they'd raised Vanessa on casseroles and homework at the table. Past the photos on the wall documenting a life built on teachers' salaries and careful planning, he ended up in Margaret's sewing room, standing in front of her bookshelf. She'd kept journals, spiral-bound notebooks filled with her looping handwriting. Harold had never read them. It felt like trespassing, even now. Tonight, he pulled one down. The cover was dated 2017, 3 years before she died. He opened it randomly, and Margaret's voice spoke to him from the page. Harold worries he didn't give Vanessa enough. I tell him every day, he gave her everything that matters. But I see her looking at her college friends' lives, their big houses and bigger cars. I'm scared she'll forget that rich isn't the same as wealthy. Wealthy is what we have. Rich is what Derek's family has. And I'm terrified she'll choose rich and lose everything. Harold read it twice. Then he set the journal down carefully, walked to his desk, and opened his laptop, a refurbished model from 2019 that still worked fine. The screen glowed to life. He opened a browser and typed carefully with his index fingers, "Warehouse jobs night shift near me." The search results loaded. Amazon Fulfillment Center, now hiring, flexible schedules, immediate start available. Harold clicked through to the application page. The form asked for his age, work history, physical limitations. He stared at the cursor blinking in the birthday field. 67. Too old for this. Too old to be standing on concrete for 10 hours. Too old to be lifting boxes and scanning items and pretending his back didn't hurt, but not too old to remember Margaret's voice. Not too old to know what wealthy meant. Harold started typing. The Amazon Fulfillment Center smelled like cardboard and ambition, a warehouse cathedral of consumerism that stretched 3 football fields in every direction. Harold Chin stood in the orientation room with 23 other new hires, most of them young enough to be his grandchildren, and listened to a woman named Keisha explain how the scanner guns worked. She was maybe 35, efficient in her movements. And she kept looking at Harold with something between concern and confusion. "You sure about this, sir?" She'd asked him twice already, the second time pulling him aside while the others practiced scanning practice items. "The health screening said you're 67. This job is physical. 10-mile walking shifts. Lots of bending, lifting, reaching. We lose people half your age in the first week." Harold adjusted the scanner gun in his hand, feeling its weight, its purpose. "Ma'am, I taught shop class for 32 years. I've operated every power tool known to man, rebuilt engines, welded steel frameworks for stage productions. I can handle a scanner gun." Keisha studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But you feel anything wrong, chest pain, dizziness, shortness of breath, you find a supervisor immediately. We've got protocols." "Understood." Harold didn't mention that wrong was relative, that his back had been complaining for a decade, that standing for 8 hours teaching used to leave him sore. This would be worse. He knew that going in. The first night, Harold scanned 1,247 items, walking what his fitness tracker, a cheap model from Walmart, claimed was 9.3 miles. His feet throbbed. His back sent warning signals that he categorized and filed away for later consideration. At 6 a.m., when his shift ended and he walked to his truck in the parking lot, dawn was breaking over the industrial park in shades of pink and gray that Margaret would have loved. She used to wake early, make coffee, and watch the sunrise from their kitchen window while Harold got ready for school. Harold sat in his truck and calculated. 4 shifts a week at $18.75 an hour, 40 hours, minus taxes. Roughly $2,100 every 2 weeks. He'd opened a new account at a different bank, one Derek wouldn't know about, labeled it Tyler's Real Future in his check register. The first deposit felt like a promise being kept. By week 2, his back had progressed from complaining to actively protesting. Harold discovered that ibuprofen came in bulk at Costco, 800 pills for $20. And that the recommended dosage was more of a suggestion than a rule when you had a quota to meet. By week 3, he was taking 4 pills every 4 hours and walking like a man twice his age, which was impossible since he was already 67 and there was a mathematical limit to these things. Sunday dinners became performance art. Harold would arrive at Derek's glass palace with his best smile, his cleanest flannel, and enough ibuprofen in his system to keep the pain at a manageable roar. Derek would make his comments about the Flintstones mobile, about Harold's retirement hobbies, about how nice it must be to have so much free time. "What do you do with yourself all week, Harold?" Derek asked one Sunday in July, swirling wine that probably cost more than Harold's truck payment used to be, back when he had truck payments. "Vanessa worries you're just sitting around the house. Isolation isn't healthy for seniors." Harold took a careful sip of water. His throat was dry from the warehouse air conditioning, his hands rough from handling cardboard. "I keep busy. Projects around the house. Some volunteer work." "Volunteer work?" Vanessa perked up from her phone, where she'd been scrolling through something that made her frown. "That's great, Dad. Where at?" "Here and there. Nothing formal." Harold cut his steak, grass-fed, Derek had announced, from a farm with a name Harold immediately forgot. The meat was tender. Everything in Derek's house was tender, expensive, carefully sourced. Nothing had to struggle, Mrs. Patterson noticed, of course. Neighbors always noticed. She was in her garden one evening when Harold left for his shift, the sun setting behind her tomato plants, and she waved him over. "Harold Chen, what are you up to?" She had dirt on her knees and suspicion in her eyes. "I see you leaving at 9:30 at night, coming back at dawn. You're not in some kind of trouble, are you?" Harold manufactured a smile. "Volunteering at a veterans center. Night counseling shifts. Lot of guys need someone to talk to in the small hours. That's good of you." Mrs. Patterson studied him with the frankness of someone who'd lived next door for 30 years. "You look tired, though. Don't work yourself too hard. Margaret would want you taking care of yourself." The next day, she brought over cookies. Chocolate chip, still warm. Tyler texted occasionally, messages that arrived on Harold's phone like small wounds. "Hey Grandpa, can't make it to dinner Sunday. Extra shift at Target. Miss you." Harold would sit in his truck during breaks, phone in hand, wanting to type the truth. Instead, "Miss you too, kid. Proud of you." Which was true but incomplete. The whole truth would require explanation, and explanation would require admission that Tyler's college fund had been stolen by his stepfather and converted into a boat. That his mother had let it happen. That Harold was destroying his body to fix what shouldn't have been broken. July 15th arrived with the temperature in the high 90s and the warehouse air conditioning struggling against the heat. Harold was moving a pallet of bulk paper towels when his back didn't just complain, it revolted. The spasm dropped him to his knees, pain white-hot and absolute. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Could only exist in that moment of his body's betrayal. The warehouse medic was a young guy named Josh who'd been an Army corpsman and had the efficient gentleness of someone trained in triage. "Sir, I need you to let me check you out." "Can you stand?" Harold got to his feet through pure stubbornness. "Just a twinge." "I'm fine." That wasn't a twinge. That was a spasm. Serious one. "I'm calling you a transport to the ER, no." Harold's voice came out harder than he intended. "No ER. I'll go home, rest. I'm fine." Josh looked at him the way Margaret used to when Harold claimed he didn't need reading glasses. "Sir, you could have a herniated disc. You could be doing permanent damage. I appreciate your concern. But I'm refusing transport." Harold signed whatever waiver Josh produced, went to his locker, and drove home sitting ramrod straight because bending hurt worse than staying rigid. He didn't go to the ER that night. He went to work the next shift. August brought Derek's sister Monica into Harold's orbit, and with her, the first suggestion that he wasn't entirely alone in enemy territory. She appeared at Sunday dinner looking different than Harold remembered, thinner, sharper somehow, her expensive real estate agent clothes hanging on her frame like armor that didn't quite fit anymore. She sat next to Harold deliberately, claiming the chair before Derek could orchestrate some other seating arrangement designed to put Harold at the conversational kids' table. "Harold, you look exhausted." Monica's voice was low enough that only he could hear over Derek's monologue about market disruption. "Are you sleeping okay? Just insomnia?" "Old age, you know." The lie came easily now. Harold had been lying for 2 months. Monica leaned closer, and Harold caught her perfume, something less aggressive than Vanessa's, more subtle. "My brother's an ass. I hope you know that." Harold turned to look at her properly. Monica had Derek's coloring but none of his performed confidence. Her eyes were tired. Her hands, he noticed, bore the telltale indentation where a wedding ring used to live. "He's your brother," Harold said carefully, "doesn't mean I'm blind." Monica's smile was sharp as broken glass. "The way he talks about you when you're not here. I've started recording some of it. Just so you know what you're dealing with." Harold felt something shift in his chest. "Why would you do that?" "Because my ex-husband was just like Derek. And I wish someone had shown me who he really was before I wasted 15 years. Consider it professional courtesy." She pulled out her phone, newer than Harold's, covered in a case that looked like marble, and showed him a video. Derek's voice, recorded at some family gathering Harold hadn't attended. The old man's getting senile. Vanessa's in denial, but I'm telling you, that house is a liability. He can't maintain it. We're doing him a favor, really, pressuring him to sell before he burns it down, forgetting the stove is on. Harold watched his daughter in the background of the video. She didn't disagree. She just nodded slowly, like Derek was explaining something complex but reasonable. I have more, Monica said, pocketing her phone. Hours more. I'll send them to you. Why are you doing this? Harold asked again. Monica looked at him with something like recognition. Because someone should have done it for me. And because you remind me of my dad. He was a machinist. Worked with his hands his whole life. Derek used to make fun of him for it, even after Dad paid for Derek's MBA. Some people forget where they came from. My brother forgot before he even left. A silent alliance formed in that moment, unspoken but solid. Harold had an ally in Derek's family. He wasn't sure what to do with that information yet, but he filed it away with all the other pieces of his growing plan. September arrived with Harold's body sending increasingly urgent messages that he was categorizing as important but not critical. The pain had become constant, a background hum he'd learned to work through. Then one night, moving a box of automotive parts, his back didn't hum. It screamed. Harold went down hard, unable to catch himself, landing on the concrete floor with his vision swimming white. This time, Josh called the ambulance before asking permission. The ER was bright and cold and smelled like industrial cleaning solution. Harold lay on a gurney while machines beeped and nurses moved with practiced efficiency. Eventually, a doctor appeared, Dr. Reyes, her badge said, and she had the no-nonsense expression of someone who'd stopped tolerating bullshit somewhere around her second year of residency. Mr. Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. Your x-rays show 3 cracked vertebrae. 2 herniated discs. This didn't happen tonight. You've been working through this for months. She pulled up images on a tablet, showed him his own spine looking like a structural failure. What are you doing? What I have to? Harold's voice came out rough. They'd given him something for the pain and it was making the edges of the world soft. You need surgery. Physical therapy. Minimum 8 weeks off work. And honestly? At your age, you shouldn't be doing whatever caused this. Dr. Reyes sat on the rolling stool, met his eyes directly. I'm legally obligated to report if I believe you're a danger to yourself. Harold thought of the account balance. He'd checked it that morning, $31,200. Close. So close. Just $16,000 more and Tyler's education was whole again. Just a few more months. How long can I delay the surgery? Dr. Reyes stared at him. Are you serious? Doc, I've got 10 weeks until Christmas. I need to work 8 more of them. Can you give me a brace? Something to keep me going, she wanted to argue. Harold could see it in her face, the war between medical ethics and something else, maybe recognition that some battles were worth fighting even when the odds were bad. She was quiet for a long time. Heavy-duty pain management. Back brace. You'll look like you're wearing body armor. And you're risking permanent damage. Paralysis isn't off the table if you keep this up, I understand. Harold did. He also understood that Tyler's future mattered more than Harold's spine. Dr. Reyes wrote prescriptions with sharp, angry strokes. No one can know about this. Especially not my family. She looked up. Mr. Chen, I'm legally obligated to, doctor, I'm not a danger to myself. I'm a man trying to fix what someone broke. There's a difference. She handed him the prescriptions and a manila envelope with his x-rays inside. Keep these. For insurance. For evidence. For whatever you're planning that you're not telling me about. Harold left the hospital at dawn with a back brace that made him look bulkier and prescriptions that would probably flag him in some database as a potential opioid abuser. He went home, slept 4 hours, and reported for his next shift. October brought escalation. Derek's campaign against Harold's independence intensified with the calculated precision of someone used to hostile takeovers. Sunday dinners became recitations of Harold's failings as a property owner. Harold, I drove past your place yesterday. The gutters are sagging. That's structural, you know. Water damage, foundation issues. You're looking at tens of thousands in repairs. Derek said it with concern so performative it qualified as satire. Vanessa showed me your property tax bill. $8,000 a year? You could be living tax-free in a senior community. Better medical care, social activities, meals included. This from Constance, Derek's mother, who'd appeared at dinner like a consultant brought in for a specific purpose. The cruelest innovation came mid-October. Derek started bringing Tyler to Sunday dinners. Tyler would arrive straight from his shift at Target, wearing his red polo and khakis, exhaustion written in the shadows under his eyes. He'd sit across from Harold, and the unspoken question hung between them like accusation, why won't you help me? Harold wanted to scream the truth across Derek's expensive table. Instead, he ate catered meals he couldn't taste and smiled through conversations that felt like depositions. Tyler caught him in the driveway one Sunday. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Harold's back was throbbing, pain breaking through the medication. Of course, kid, why won't you sell the house? I mean, Derek's kind of pushy about it, but he's not wrong. It's a lot for one person. And if you did, you could help with school. I'm not trying to pressure you. I don't understand. Harold looked at his grandson, Margaret's favorite, 19 years old and tired from working retail to pay for community college because his trust fund bought a boat. Tyler, would you trust me if I told you I'm working on something? That it's not what it looks like, I guess? Tyler looked confused. Are you okay, Grandpa? You look different. Thinner, I'm fine. But I need you to trust me a little longer. Can you do that? Tyler nodded slowly, then hugged Harold carefully, like he was afraid of breaking something. He was right to be afraid, though not for the reasons he thought. November arrived with Monica's intelligence operation bearing fruit. She started forwarding screenshots from Derek's family group chat, messages from a conversation Harold had never been invited to join. They arrived on his phone during breaks at the warehouse, bitter little windows into how he was discussed in his absence. Derek, old man's pride, is going to leave Tyler in debt for 20 years. I'm done being patient. Christmas intervention time, Constance, maybe a senior home tour? I know a lovely place in Scottsdale. Derek, better idea. I've got a developer buddy. I'll invite him to Christmas dinner. Let him casually make Harold an offer he can't refuse. In front of everyone. Social pressure. Vanessa, Derek, that feels manipulative. Derek, babe, it's called strategy. Your dad doesn't understand real estate. We're helping him, Monica called that night. Harold was sitting in his truck after his shift, body armor back brace cutting into his ribs, pain medication making the world fuzzy at the edges. He's planning an ambush. Christmas Day. Are you just going to let him? Harold leaned his head back against the seat. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few other night shift workers heading to their cars. Monica, can I ask you something? Do you believe people get what they deserve? I believe people get what they tolerate. Then Derek's about to get exactly what he's earned. There was a pause. Harold could hear something in the background of Monica's call, traffic, maybe, or wind. She was outside somewhere. Harold, what are you planning? Would you be willing to film Christmas dinner? Everything. From the moment I arrive to the moment I leave. Monica's laugh was low and surprised. Harold Chen, are you about to do something legendary? I'm about to show my daughter who her husband really is. And I'm about to give my grandson his future back. But I need witnesses. Consider it done. And Harold? I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. You're speaking up now. That's what matters. The pause that followed felt different, weighted with something Harold hadn't expected. Monica's voice, when it came, was softer. When this is over, would you let me take you to dinner? Somewhere that doesn't serve Derek's ego as an appetizer. Harold found himself smiling despite the pain in his back, in his legs, in places he hadn't known could hurt. Monica, are you asking me on a date? I'm asking a man who's clearly tougher and smarter than he lets on if he'd like company from a woman who's finally learning to recognize quality. I'm old, broken, and I live in a house your brother thinks is a teardown. My brother thinks Patagonia vests are formal wear. His opinion is worthless. What do you think? Harold thought of Margaret, of her journals, of what she'd written about being wealthy versus being rich. I think Margaret would have liked you. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me disappear into my workshop. Is that a yes? Ask me again on December 26th. If I survive Christmas, Monica's laugh was warm. Deal. Try not to die before our first date. Chen. I've had enough disappointment from the men in my life. December arrived with Harold's body making increasingly urgent arguments for retirement, surgery, and common sense. He ignored all of them. His co-workers had noticed he was moving slower, that he took longer breaks, that he sometimes stood absolutely still with his eyes closed like he was waiting for something to pass. His supervisor, a woman named Carmen who'd worked at the warehouse for 12 years, pulled him aside during a shift. Harold, man, you don't have to prove anything. Whatever you're doing this for, it's not worth permanent damage. Harold was scanning boxes, his hands moving automatically. It's worth everything. Carmen didn't ask what it was. Maybe she understood that some things were private, that some wars were fought quietly in the spaces between shifts. December 15th, Harold's phone dinged with a bank notification. Account balance, $47,000. He stood in the middle of the warehouse, scanner gun in hand, and felt something in his chest that wasn't pain. Relief, maybe. Or victory. Or the knowledge that he'd kept a promise to a woman 4 years dead and a grandson who didn't know he was being saved. Harold requested his final 2 weeks off. Family matters, he told Carmen, and she didn't ask questions. Those 2 weeks became a careful choreography of preparation. Harold met with an estate attorney. A woman who specialized in elder law and looked at him with professional concern when he explained what he wanted. The house deed transferred to Tyler with a life estate for Harold. Specific conditions about contesting or selling. Language that would make Derek's ambitions legally impossible. He met with Tyler's university, sat across from a financial aid counselor who pulled up Tyler's account on her computer and winced. Mr. Chen, I'm going to be honest with you. This balance has been in collections for 4 months. Tyler's academic standing is suspended. He'd need to pay in full and petition for reinstatement. Harold handed her a cashier's check for $47,000. Will this cover it? The counselor stared at the check. This will cover it and next semester. Good. Can we keep this between us until after Christmas? I want to tell him myself. She smiled properly for the first time. I think we can arrange that. Harold visited Dr. Reyes, who looked at him like she was trying to decide whether to call Adult Protective Services or give him a medal. You actually did it. You worked 8 more weeks on a broken spine. I did what I had to. Harold collected the officially documented X-rays, dated and signed. Evidence. Proof. Ammunition for a war he hadn't started but intended to finish. The last preparation was coffee with Monica. They met at a diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that was actually just coffee, not some artisanal experience requiring explanation. Monica arrived in jeans and a sweater, looking more like herself than Harold had ever seen her. She slid into the booth across from him and set her phone on the table. I brought the recordings. All of them. Are you sure you want to see this? Harold wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I'm sure. Monica played them. Hours of Derek holding court at family gatherings Harold hadn't attended, at dinners where wine flowed and egos expanded. The worst came from Thanksgiving. Derek, clearly drunk, gesturing with his wine glass. The old man won't ruin Christmas again with his blue-collar guilt trips. By New Year's, that house is ours. Tyler will thank us eventually. And if Harold wants to rot in some Medicaid facility because he's too proud to accept help, that's on him. Vanessa was visible in the background, illuminated by the glow of her phone. She didn't disagree. She just disappeared into her wine glass. Harold watched his daughter's face, his little girl who used to help him build stage sets, who'd believed in things once before Derek taught her that beliefs were less valuable than assets. When did I lose her? Monica reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. I don't think you did. I think she lost herself. But you're about to give her a chance to find her way back. They sat in that diner for 2 hours, drinking coffee that went cold, planning a Christmas confrontation with the precision of a military operation. Monica showed him all of Derek's messages, all the family group chat conversations, all the evidence of contempt wrapped in concern. By the time they left, Harold had everything he needed. In the parking lot, Monica paused by her car. Harold Chen, you're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most stubborn. Can't it be both? She laughed, and the sound was different than he'd heard before, lighter, genuine. December 26th. I'm holding you to that dinner, I'll be there. Assuming Derek doesn't murder me with his bare hands. If he tries, I'll film that too. Monica got in her car, then rolled down the window. Hey Harold? Margaret was right. You are wealthy. She drove away before he could ask what she meant, leaving Harold standing in the parking lot with a manila envelope full of x-rays and a plan that would either restore his family or destroy what was left of it. Christmas was 8 days away. Christmas morning arrived with the algorithmic precision of Derek Ashford's smart home system. Lights gradually brightening to simulate a winter sunrise that the California coast had never actually experienced. Harold Chen sat in his truck in the circular driveway, engine ticking as it cooled, and watched the house through a windshield that needed replacing. The glass had a crack spreading from the lower right corner, a spiderweb of failure he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. Everything about his truck announced its age: the faded paint, the manual windows, the cassette deck that still played Margaret's old Christmas tapes if he could find them. In contrast, Derek's house looked like it had been designed by an AI trained exclusively on architectural magazines and billionaire Instagram accounts. The decorations were perfect. Too perfect. A 14-foot tree visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, each ornament placed with the kind of intentionality that required either obsession or professional help. Probably both. White lights, never colored. Derek had opinions about colored lights, wrapped the exterior in geometric patterns that probably looked stunning from the street and cost more than Harold's property taxes. A pianist was visible through another window, playing something classical that Harold couldn't identify. Background music for people who needed their lives to have soundtracks. Harold reached for the manila envelope on the passenger seat, felt its weight, its promise. 8 months of night shifts compressed into paper and medical imaging. He'd put on his cleanest flannel shirt this morning, the green one that Margaret always said brought out his eyes, though Harold suspected she'd been kind about his eyes the same way she'd been kind about his singing voice. The Timex on his wrist read 11:47. Dinner was at noon. Derek ran his life on schedules that synced across devices, sent notifications, tracked attendance like a corporate HR system, probably monitored his employees. The front door opened before Harold could knock. Derek materialized with his practiced smile, wearing what he probably called festive casual, a cashmere sweater that cost more than Harold's monthly grocery bill, tailored pants, loafers without socks despite it being December. His smartwatch glowed with notifications he was definitely monitoring even as he extended his hand for the too-firm handshake that had become their ritual. Harold. Merry Christmas. Derek's voice had that projection that came from years of conference calls and presentations. Still driving the vintage Chevy, I see. That thing's what, almost 40 years old now? It's practically a collector's item. 38 years, Harold said, accepting the handshake, feeling Derek's grip, trying to prove something neither of them needed proven. Runs fine, of course it does. Built different back then, right? Before planned obsolescence. Derek guided him inside with a hand on the shoulder that felt less like welcome and more like steering. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the great room. Tyler just got here. The house smelled like catered food and whatever expensive candles Vanessa bought that were supposed to evoke winter forest or alpine lodge or some other environment that had never existed in this sanitized, climate-controlled space. Everything echoed: Harold's footsteps, Derek's voice, the pianists playing, bouncing off hard surfaces that prioritized aesthetics over acoustics. The great room opened up like a showroom, all glass and steel and carefully curated comfort that wasn't actually comfortable. Tyler stood near the tree, still wearing his Target polo under a jacket he hadn't taken off. He looked thin. Not just thin, depleted. The kind of tired that came from working double shifts and eating ramen and wondering if this was what the rest of life looked like. He saw Harold and his face transformed, relief and something close to gratitude flooding his expression. "Grandpa." Tyler crossed the room in 3 long strides and hugged Harold carefully. Like he was afraid something might break. "Merry Christmas." "Sorry, I haven't been around much." Harold hugged his grandson back, feeling Tyler's ribs through his shirt, cataloging the weight loss, the exhaustion radiating off him like heat. "You've been working hard." "Nothing to apologize for," Tyler pulled back, his smile bitter at the edges. "Working hard to stay broke." "But hey, Dad says it builds character." "Your dad's right about one thing," Harold said quietly, aware of Derek hovering nearby, monitoring the conversation. "Character matters. But not the way he thinks." Across the room, Monica Ashford was positioned near a bookshelf, her phone propped at an angle that looked casual but was clearly deliberate. She caught Harold's eye and gave him the smallest nod. The camera was rolling. Everything that happened today would be documented, time-stamped, admissible as evidence in whatever court this family gathering had become. Vanessa emerged from the kitchen, her cocktail dress the kind of thing people wore to Christmas dinner in magazines, not in real life. Her hair was styled, her makeup perfect, her jewelry subtle but expensive. Diamond studs Harold had never seen before caught the light from the designer chandelier. She kissed his cheek, her perfume sharp and unfamiliar. "Merry Christmas, Dad." "You look good." Harold knew he didn't. He looked like a man who'd spent 8 months destroying his body in a warehouse. His flannel shirt hung looser than it had in May. His face was drawn. But Vanessa's compliment was automatic, the kind of social lubrication that kept conversations moving without requiring actual observation. "You look beautiful, honey." That was true even if he didn't recognize her. Derek's mother, Constance, held court near the fireplace, a gas model that produced perfectly controlled flames on demand. She wore pearls and judgment in equal measure, her posture suggesting that sitting was something other people did out of weakness. "Harold, how lovely to see you." Merry Christmas, Constance." Harold had never called her anything else. She'd never invited him to. A man Harold didn't recognize stood near the bar, nursing whiskey and examining everyone with the professional assessment of someone who saw people as transactions. Derek materialized at Harold's elbow with introductions. "Harold, this is Richard Castellano." "Richard, my father-in-law." "Harold Chin." "Richard's in development. Commercial and residential. We've worked on a few deals together." Richard's handshake was professionally neutral, his smile practiced. "Pleasure to meet you, Harold." "Derek speaks very highly of you." Harold doubted that but accepted the lie with a nod. Likewise, the pianist in the corner shifted into something Harold recognized. "God rest ye merry gentlemen," filtered through classical training and stripped of anything resembling joy. Derek herded everyone toward the dining room with the organizational skills that had probably made him successful in business and unbearable at home. The table was set for 8 with china that looked too delicate to actually use, crystal that refracted light into tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth, and silverware that was probably actual silver. Place cards indicated where everyone should sit, Derek at the head, naturally, Vanessa to his right, Harold positioned between Tyler and Constance in what felt like a strategic containment. Servers appeared from the kitchen in matching uniforms, carrying plates arranged with the kind of precision that turned food into architecture. Harold recognized nothing on his plate immediately. Some kind of fish, vegetables he'd need to ask about, a reduction drizzled in patterns that suggested someone had gone to culinary school. "This is the halibut with preserved lemon and winter vegetables," Derek announced, as if knowing the menu was an achievement. Chef Marcus sourced everything locally. "The fish was caught yesterday morning." Harold picked up his fork and took a bite. The fish was perfectly cooked, delicate, expensive. It tasted like Derek's need for everyone to know it was expensive. They made it through 2 courses, the halibut, then some kind of pork tenderloin with a cherry reduction Derek explained in detail no one had requested, before Derek began his orchestration. He had that executive posture, leaning back slightly, hands steepled, preparing to deliver a presentation. Richard Castellano straightened in his seat like he'd received a cue. "So, Harold," Derek began, his tone carefully casual, "Richard and I were talking about the real estate market. It's incredible right now. Properties in established neighborhoods are commanding premiums. Especially if they've got good bones, you know?" Original character, Harold set down his wine glass. He'd taken 1 sip, enough to be polite. Derek was on his 4th pour of something he'd pronounced at length when opening the bottle. "That's so, absolutely," Richard leaned in, all professional enthusiasm. "I just helped a client with a property transition. Similar situation to yours, actually, Harold. Aging parent, family home, empty nest. We transitioned her into a beautiful assisted living community, independent living, really, all the amenities, and sold the house in 30 days. Cash offer. Everyone won," Constance added her voice from across the table. "It must be difficult, Harold, maintaining that whole house by yourself. All that yard work, the repairs. At our age, simplicity becomes so appealing." Harold cut his pork into smaller pieces, buying time, feeling the weight of their attention. Tyler was watching him with something between concern and confusion. Vanessa was studying her plate with intense focus. Monica's phone was still propped on the bookshelf, visible through the archway, recording everything. "The house is fine," Harold said carefully. "Is it though?" Derek's tone was gentle, concerned, the kind of voice you used with someone who needed help but wouldn't ask for it. Vanessa mentioned the gutters are sagging. "That's not cosmetic, Harold. That's structural. Water damage, foundation issues. You could be looking at tens of thousands in repairs." "Dad, we're just worried about you," Vanessa said, finally looking up. Her voice carried an edge of pleading that would have worked better if she'd managed to make eye contact. "That house is a lot for one person. There are wonderful communities now. Senior living has changed so much. They've got programs, activities, medical care right on site, and financially," Derek continued, building momentum like this was a pitch he'd rehearsed. "Your property taxes alone are what, $8,000 a year? You could be living tax-free in a community. Better quality of life, better security, and the proceeds from the sale could help Tyler." There it was. The hook they'd been working toward. Tyler's name deployed like a weapon. Tyler's fork clattered against his plate. "Don't use me to manipulate Grandpa," Derek's smile didn't waver. "I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm pointing out reality. Harold, you're sitting on a small fortune. I ran the comps last month. Your place is worth $680, maybe $700,000 in this market, while your grandson works retail to pay for community college. What's the plan here?" The question hung in the air, and Harold felt the room closing in. Everyone was staring at him, Derek with performative concern, Richard with professional interest, Constance with aristocratic expectation, Vanessa with guilty hope, Tyler with desperate confusion. The pressure was physical. Pushing down on his shoulders, tightening around his chest, Harold stood slowly. His back protested, pain shooting up his spine where 3 vertebrae had cracked under the weight of 40-pound boxes and 10-mile shifts. The brace under his shirt dug into his ribs. Every movement was calculated, careful, the choreography of someone whose body had become a negotiation. "Derek, you're right." Harold reached for the manila envelope he'd left by his chair, felt its weight, its promise. "I should have had a plan. So I made one." Derek's expression flickered, surprise, quickly masked by curiosity. "Oh? You're reconsidering, in a way?" Harold walked toward the kitchen, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood. The envelope in his hand like a summons. He could hear Derek behind him, following, and Richard's chair scraping as he stood, and Tyler's grandpa, floating after him. The kitchen was all marble and stainless steel, professional appliances that probably cost more than Harold's truck, counters clear except for serving platters waiting to be deployed for the next course. Harold moved toward the butler's pantry, because of course there was a butler's pantry, and heard voices before he reached the doorway. Derek's voice, lower now, intended for privacy. The old man won't ruin Christmas again with his blue-collar guilt trips. Trust me, by New Year's, we'll have him signing papers. Vanessa's already on board. Richard's offer will seem generous, everyone saves face, and we can finally stop pretending that house isn't wasted on someone who can't maintain it. Richard's response was cautious. You sure about this? He seems pretty resistant, he's old and sentimental. It's not about logic. But with enough pressure, the right framing, making it about Tyler, he'll crack. They always do. Harold stepped into the doorway. Derek's face went white, then red, the color change rapid and almost comical. Richard took a step back, hands up like he was surrendering. You're right, Derek. Harold's voice was calm, almost gentle, the tone he'd used teaching seniors who were failing and needed to understand why. I won't ruin Christmas. He placed the manila envelope on the marble counter, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. Derek and Richard stared at it like it might explode. But I will show everyone what I ruined my spine for. Harold pulled out the X-ray first, holding it up to the overhead lights. The image was stark, his vertebrae visible, the cracks clear even to untrained eyes, the herniated discs bulging where they shouldn't. Medical imaging as evidence. Proof of sacrifice translated into black and white and shades of gray. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, Tyler behind her, Monica positioning herself where her phone could capture everything. The great room emptied into the kitchen. Everyone drawn by the sudden silence, the shift in atmosphere from forced celebration to something rawer. Dad, what is that? Vanessa's voice was small, uncertain. X-rays from September, Harold said, still holding the image up, letting the light reveal every crack, every herniation, every physical manifestation of 8 months at the Amazon Fulfillment Center. 3 cracked vertebrae. 2 herniated discs. From working night shifts at a warehouse for the last 8 months, Tyler made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Vanessa's hand went to her mouth. Constance had gone very still, her expression unreadable. Richard was edging toward the exit like he'd suddenly remembered an important appointment elsewhere. Dad, why would you? Vanessa couldn't finish the question. Because someone stole your son's college fund to buy a boat. Harold set down the X-ray and opened the leather portfolio he'd brought, the one containing 8 months of preparation distilled into documents. And because I'm apparently the only one who remembers what Margaret wanted for Tyler, he began placing papers on the marble counter, each one a card in a hand he'd been building since May. Bank statements first, every deposit documented, every penny labeled Tyler's fund restoration. The numbers told their own story. $2,100, $2,100, $2,100, building slowly toward redemption. Tyler, your college fund is whole. Harold slid the account information across the counter. Tyler picked it up with shaking hands. It's been transferred to an account in your name. Spring semester is paid. You're reinstated as of January 15th. Tyler's legs gave out. He sat hard on a kitchen stool, hands pressed to his mouth, the paper trembling between his fingers. He was crying, silent tears running down his face while he stared at the numbers that meant his future was possible again. Document 2, screenshots of Derek's texts, blown up and printed, highlighted for emphasis. Harold read them aloud, his voice steady. Tyler's too soft for business school. Let him learn the hard way. The old man's house is wasted on him, we'll liquidate after he's gone. Vanessa agrees, her father's becoming a liability. Vanessa turned to Derek, her voice shaking. You said the money was lost. You said it was gone. Market crash, you said. You looked me in the eye and told me there was nothing we could do. Derek's face cycled through expressions, shock, anger, calculation. Vanessa, this is taken out of context. You know how text messages, no context makes liquidate sound better, Derek. Harold placed the final document on the counter, the property deed, stamped and notarized, legally binding. The house. Margaret's house. It's been transferred to Tyler with a life estate for me. I live there as long as I want. When I'm gone, it's his. Free and clear, Derek exploded. You can't just give away our inheritance. That's not legal. Vanessa, tell him, it's perfectly legal, Harold said calmly. I had an attorney review everything. But here's the interesting part. He tapped the deed. There's a contestment clause. If anyone tries to pressure Tyler to sell, or challenges this transfer, or attempts to manipulate him in any way, the entire property gets donated to the county. They're going to turn it into a vocational training center. In Margaret's name, Richard was definitely leaving now, edging toward the door with the survival instincts of someone who recognized disaster. Derek, I think I'm going to, no. Richard, stay. Harold's voice was mild but firm. You should hear this. See, Derek told Tyler the money was lost. He told Vanessa I was becoming a liability. He told his mother I needed a senior intervention. But what he told you, Richard, at Thanksgiving, you remember, Richard looked like he wanted to disappear. Harold, I don't think this is the time, he told you I was getting dementia. Harold let that hang in the air. That Vanessa had medical power of attorney. That you'd be helping a confused old man before he hurt himself. Isn't that right? That's a lie. Derek's voice was desperate now, too loud. I never said, it's not. Monica stepped forward from her position by the bookshelf. Phone in hand, screen bright. I've got the video. Hours of it. Want to see? The kitchen had gone silent except for Tyler's breathing and the distant sound of the pianist still playing in the other room, oblivious to the fact that the performance was over and the real show had begun. Vanessa was staring at Derek like she'd never seen him before, like someone had pulled back a curtain and revealed something she'd been refusing to look at for years. You told me Dad wanted to sell, she whispered. You said he was too proud to ask for help downsizing. You said we were helping him. Derek reached for her. Babe, I was trying to protect you from. From what? Vanessa's voice was rising. From my father? The man who paid for my college? Who walked me down the aisle? Who's apparently been breaking his back, literally, to fix what you broke. Tyler stood, the bank statement still clutched in his hand. Grandpa, you worked at a warehouse? For me? You're 67 years old. Harold turned to his grandson, and for the first time all day, his eyes were wet. Your grandmother made me promise something before she died. She said, don't let them forget that money doesn't make you rich. People do. Choices do. What you give, not what you take. He paused, looked at Vanessa. I failed your mother. I let Derek turn her into someone your grandmother wouldn't recognize. But I wasn't going to fail you. You didn't fail Mom, Tyler said, but his voice was uncertain. Look at her, Tyler. Really look. Harold's voice was gentle but relentless. Does she look like the girl who used to help me build stage sets? Who volunteered at soup kitchens? Who told me she wanted to be a public defender because everyone deserves a voice? Vanessa was crying now, silent tears that cut tracks through her perfect makeup, her carefully constructed Christmas face dissolving into something more real and more broken. She stood in her expensive dress in her expensive kitchen and looked lost. Harold's voice softened. Baby girl, I don't know when you decided that marble countertops mattered more than the people sitting at the table. But your mother would have been heartbroken. And I'm tired of watching you disappear. Derek's desperation had curdled into aggression. This is insane. You're all acting like I'm the villain here. I provide for this family. This house, these cars, Tyler's first 2 years of college, that was me. I built this. I earned this, and Tyler's debt? Harold asked quietly. His dropout status? His belief that he wasn't good enough for his own dreams? That was you too, Derek, shut up. Monica's voice cut through her brother's building tirade. You've lost. Read the room. Constance stood, her pearls catching the kitchen lights. Derek, we're leaving. This is. I can't. she walked out without looking back. Her heels clicking on the hardwood like a countdown. Richard had already disappeared, probably calling a car service, definitely updating his LinkedIn to remove any association with Derek Ashford. The kitchen emptied slowly. Derek stood at the center of his marble and stainless steel showcase, face red, fists clenched, everything he'd orchestrated collapsing around him like a carefully constructed facade meeting actual foundation issues. Are you just going to stand there? He turned to Vanessa, desperation in his voice. He's humiliating me in our own home. Vanessa's voice was quiet, drained. Our home that you bought with my trust fund. That I just remembered, that was different. How? How is it different? She turned to Harold, and something in her face had shifted, the performance dropping away to reveal exhaustion underneath. Dad, where are you staying tonight? I was planning to drive home. With a cracked spine, Monica stepped forward, decisive. He's staying with me. I've got a guest room. And I'm making him see a proper physical therapist tomorrow. Someone who can actually help, not just prescribe pain medication and false hope. Vanessa looked between them, and something like relief crossed her face. Thank you, Monica. Tyler grabbed his jacket from where he'd left it. Can I come too, Grandpa? I don't. I can't be here right now, always. Harold said, and meant it. They moved toward the front door, Harold, Tyler, and Monica, leaving Derek standing in his showcase kitchen with Vanessa still staring at him like she was trying to remember who he was, or who she was, or how they'd ended up in this expensive space that suddenly felt very empty. In the driveway, Harold's truck sat between the Tesla and the Range Rover, ancient and defiant. Vanessa caught Harold's arm before he could leave. I'm so sorry. Her voice was broken. I don't know. I don't know how I became this. Harold looked at his daughter, his little girl who used to believe in things, who used to care about things that mattered. The same way everyone loses themselves. Honey. One compromise at a time. One it's easier this way at a time. But you're not gone. Not yet. What do I do? You remember who you were before Derek told you who to be. And you decide if that girl would recognize the woman in the mirror. Harold drove away with Tyler in the passenger seat and Monica following in her car, leaving Derek's perfect house with its perfect decorations and its perfect pianist still playing in the background, soundtrack to a life that had just revealed itself to be hollow at the center, expensive on the surface, bankrupt where it mattered.